Genesis chapter 13. Genesis chapter 13. Okay, after we've taken Genesis chapter 13, I want to focus on the choice that Abraham makes over what Lot makes. So, if someone could read from chapter 13, verses 8 to 13.
So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is it not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right, and if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, and that it is well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan. Lot dwelt in the cities of plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord.
Okay, so now we see two different people here, and there are certain contexts that we have to understand before we go further. Abraham is the uncle of Lot. Lot is the son of Abraham's brother. So he's a son of Haran. Haran is the brother of Abraham. What happens here is that we see that the herdsmen of the shepherds that worked under Lot and the shepherds that worked under Abraham, they had a fight amongst themselves. They said we don't have enough pasture and we don't have enough wells for both of our flocks to stay here, so we'll have to go our separate ways. Now, the thing about here is that Abraham is the older man here. He could easily say that I will go somewhere and whatever is left, Lot, you go there, because simply due to age, he had the right to say that. But then he doesn't do that. He gives the choice for Lot first before he chooses the other. He says, whatever you choose, I will choose the opposite. So we see here that Lot chooses. Someone can go through verse 10 again? Verse 10. I'll go through verse 10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. So he saw that this land was well watered. It was very prosperous. It was more fertile. It had a lot more to offer Lot than the land of Canaan. So he chose that. But one thing we have to notice here is that in verse 13, it says that the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So Lot knew that the people there were sinners. He knew that the men there were wicked. And yet he chose to go there simply because the land that he went to had more to offer him. It had more resources, it had more wealth overall. So he chose that. And later on, we'll see what that choice implied for a consequence of that choice for Lot. But then we look at Abram. Now, Abram then, because he had to choose whatever was left, he had to go to the land of Canaan. And someone could read verse 18, Genesis chapter 13, verse 18.
Then Abraham moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord.
And here it says that Abraham moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Now, what I want to focus on here is that the land that Abraham went to was obviously not as fertile or as prosperous as the land that Lot chose. Lot chose the more fertile land. So, Abraham settles in Canaan. And the thing about Abraham is that he spent his entire life only in tents. He never got to build a city. He never built a house for himself. He left the city of his father, which is Ur in Mesopotamia, and then he spent the rest of his life roaming from place to place in tents. And here we see that he put up his tent near the oaks of Mamre, which was Mamre was a man who probably owned the land. And there it says he built an altar to the Lord. Now, what I want to ask people here is now, Lot chose to go to Sodom. Chose to go to one of the cities there, the city where men were wicked. Was it possible for Lot to build an altar to the Lord there within that city or near that city? Do you think it would have been possible for him to do that? Do you think he would have been able to build an altar to the God El, his God, God the Father? Do you think he would have been able to build an altar among these people? The people of Sodom. Would he be, supported or allowed or encouraged to do
Oh,
so?
no, no.
No, no, no. He would have been physically able, but he didn't do it. He could not do it as easy as Abraham did. But verse 18 means that Abraham, he was able to go and he built an altar to the Lord. Now, the funny thing here is he built an altar to the Lord, but he never built a house for himself there. He chose to build an altar to the Lord. Now, what is an altar for? What do people do with an altar? The altar specifically is for sacrifice. When you offer in the Old Testament, when they used to offer lambs and goats and all that, it's a structure in which you offered the sacrifice to God. So he built an altar to the Lord there. Now, what I want to look at there is Abraham chose to go to a place that was less prosperous. He went to a place that was less fertile, to a lesser land than what the Lord chose. And there he was able to build an altar to the Lord. The same could not be said of Lot. Lot, what happened to him was he chose what was good for himself. He chose what was pleasurable or comfortable for himself. And the result was that he could not offer anything to the Lord because there was no place to offer. Abraham could do so because he went to a place where an altar could be built. He chose what was more important. Lot chose what was prosperous. He chose what was beneficial to him, even if he was to be surrounded by people who don't believe in God. Even if it was to be surrounded by people who are against God. He would see that in verse 13, the people of Sodom, the men of Sodom, were exceedingly evil. But for Lot, that wasn't an issue. Lot himself felt that let them be evil. I don't plan to take part in their evil, so let me go live among them. But later on, okay, we'll see what happens to Lot afterwards. Now, we can go to chapter 19, verse 1. Read verse 1 first.
Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground.
So, this is a lot to, if you want to know the whole story, there's too many verses to read. I'll explain what's going on. So, what happens here is that these two angels, they're sent there to Sodom because God has planned to destroy Sodom. He wants to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities because of the evil found there. And, well, basically, what happens, we'll read what kind of evil was going there. Verse 4, someone could read from verse 4 to verse 9, 4 to 9. Now,
Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, surrounded the house, and they called to Lord and said to him, Where are the two men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them carnally. So Lord went out to them through the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you. You may do them as you wish, only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. And they said, Stand back. Then they said, This one came in to stay here and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door.
So we see here that these men, the evil that God spoke of before was that it was a city of probably, in other words, it was like San Francisco in the US. It was a lot of gay men there essentially. This is probably the first time that homosexuality is mentioned in the Bible, and even the word today, there's a word called sodomite or sodomizing. It comes from this city. It's basically when unnatural sex or homosexuality. There's another word for it. It's called sodomy. So that word came from the men of this city. So basically they said they wanted to, the angels, they didn't know they were angels. They said they were just two men. So they want those two men to come out of Lord's house so that they can rape them essentially, to have sex with them. And here we see the fact that these men are demanding this is disturbing enough. But then Lot does something that is even more pathetic, which is in verse 8. He says that don't harm these men. Instead, I have two virgin daughters. I will leave them to you and you can do with them whatever you want. Now, that is a sign of what happens when you're surrounded by people who don't know God. The thing about here is Lot himself did not engage in these acts. He was not one of the wicked men. But when you live among wicked men, your standard of right and wrong, what you consider to be true or not true, your sensitivity or your conscience is so numbed by what is going on that you forget what is right and wrong. You simply want to avoid any kind of conflict. You just want to avoid conflict. And to avoid that conflict, when you live among people who don't know God or who hate God, you eventually start to give in to them. Even if you don't partake in the same things that they do, even if you don't say the same things or do the same things, you will be forced to just stay quiet and let them do whatever they want, to be tolerant, essentially. Lot here was displaying the very unchristian virtue of tolerance. Tolerance is not a Christian virtue. It has never been a Christian virtue. But of course, Lot was forced to tolerate. He knew that the men here were all, they were essentially bloodthirsty homosexuals, but he couldn't do anything about it. He just tolerated them. He didn't want to do anything. So he stayed there. But that's the problem. When you know that something is going on bad around you, when you know that the place where you live is not righteous, it's not a good place to live in, and you continue to live there, your state of right and wrong, what you consider to be right and wrong, your moral compass becomes confused. Like, there's an actual compass, and if you bring a magnet near it, the compass simply goes haywire. It starts pointing in all different directions. It loses its meaning, it loses its purpose. It becomes chaos. There's no order there. There is no understanding of what is right and wrong. And that's what happens when you stay with, or, live around or engage in a culture that doesn't acknowledge God as God. And people wonder where this sin of homosexuality comes from. Like, why would anyone engage in this? And I guess for that, we can go to Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, it's shown as a direct correlation to when people reject God. Romans chapter 1, verses 21 and 22, and then we'll skip 23 and then go for 24 and 25 and 26. For now, we'll just go for Romans chapter 1, verse 21.
Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts. Their foolish hearts were darkened, and changed the glory of incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. And for this reason, God gave them up to wild passions, and for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. And likewise also the men leaving the natural use of the woman and burned in their lust for one another, and man with the man committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting.
So here, especially in verses 27, 26, that's probably, people when they want to find out where the Bible condemns homosexuality, they usually refer to Leviticus or they go to Corinthians. But this is probably the most clear, where there's no doubt for interpretation as to what this could mean. He's very clear here. He says that because they did not honor God as God, he gave them over to the sexual passions, the unnatural relations. And here it's basically talking about men having sex with men and then women having sex with women. And, as far as I'm concerned, they can't actually have sex. They do it for the pleasure. And here it's very clear that why this happens. Because if we go back, he says, instead of giving glory to God, they started worshipping the created things. And maybe long back, it was in the form of worshipping nature or worshipping animals or gods that resembled animals. If you look at Egypt, ancient Egypt, all of their gods have the heads of animals. There is Anubis, who has the head of a jackal. There is Horus, he has the head of a falcon. Sobek has the head of a crocodile. And in many cultures, you'll find these anthropomorphic gods. They look like human beings, but they're very closely connected with beasts. And in the modern sense, you can take it in this way. Especially in verse 23, they exchange the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and birds and animals and creeping things. Now, in the modern sense, the glory that goes to God is that God is the creator. He has made all things. Today, today, not many people worship animals or non-living things, and they don't do that, but they do worship evolution, for example. Now, they don't exactly worship, but they give glory over to evolution. They say evolution is the reason why man exists. Evolution is the defining feature of humanity, that we're not here as a result of creation, but we're here as a result of evolution. We were at one point not that different from the chimpanzees today, and then due to the facilitation of evolution, that we are now human beings. Instead of giving glory to God who has made us in his image, they choose to replace God with a completely naturalistic explanation. They say that there's no God involved. It was purely the matter of evolution. From evolution, we went from beasts to man. So, and you can trace that easily. Like throughout history, we've always had instances of or examples of homosexuality prevalent throughout history, all the way from the Greeks to the Japanese to the Persians, and it was present all throughout. But especially in the last 100 to 150 years, it has become more and more accepted, more and more prevalent. And what I've seen is it coincides almost exactly with a book that was published in 1859. The book that was published in 1859 was The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, which was the book that basically said man is not a result of creation, but that man was a result of completely scientific process called evolution. So basically, modern men, modern human beings, what they say is God is not the reason that we exist. Rather, it's we give glory to evolution. We honor or we patronize evolution. Evolution is the reason for our existence. We will give the credit for our existence to evolution, and as a result of which, at no point in history has homosexuality been as accepted as it is today, especially in the West and even in India. I think India is everything that happens in the West. India is just 10 to 15 years behind. Whatever is happening there will eventually reach here. And again, these men, they were fundamentally corrupt. There was no redeeming them. But the problem was not that they were corrupt. The problem was not that they were evil, because that is how they are. The problem here is that Lot chose to live near these men. He had the choice to not live with them. He had the choice to go somewhere else. But no, he knew that the men of Sodom were evil and he chose to live there. Why would you think Lot chose to live there despite knowing that these were the kind of men who lived there? Why do you think he chose to go and live near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah? It's more fruitful, it's more comfortable, it's a proper city. It's like it has protection and all that. Instead of living in the wilderness, which is what Abraham was doing. He lived near oak trees. He basically lived near a forest back then. The oaks of Mamre, the cedar trees of Lebanon is what is talking about. The trees of Lebanon, they're a forest area. So, and the forest back then, not today, but way back then, we're talking 3,500 to 4,000 years ago, way back then, forests back then had lions and bears. Today, you won't find lions in the Middle East, but way back then, in Gujarat, we have the Asiatic lion. They call it the Asiatic lion and not the Indian lion. It's because the lions existed all the way from Turkey to India. The Asiatic line was all over the place. And back then, the forests of Lebanon, or the forests of Hebron, yeah, not Lebanon, they had lions and they had bears, and it was not a very safe place to raise a family or any of those things. But then he chose to go there. Abraham chose to go there, even though it was not the best place to go. Again, I explained that the evilness of Lot going and living in those cities and the way that he fell, his standard of right and wrong was so corrupt that he thought, in order to keep these two guests, to keep these two men safe, I will throw out my daughters to them. I will sacrifice my daughters. I will throw away my future, my own children, because that was the level of compromise that he had to deal with. And then later on, when thankfully that didn't happen, the angels pulled back Lot and they struck the men blind, as we see in verse 11. They were able to escape. Lot and his family, they escaped. But then later on, what happens is there's two instances. Genesis chapter 19, verse 25 and 26.
So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt.
She became a pillar of salt. Now, I mean, that seemed like a very odd thing to become, but even I don't understand why it was distinctly a pillar of salt. But it seems like it's she all she did was just look back. Why punish her in this way for doing this? Now we have to realize what kind of city she was looking back at. She looked back at the city not out of curiosity as to what was happening or out of some kind of interest into the destruction of Sodom. She looked back in the sense that she actually missed the city. That was probably the city in which she grew up in. That was probably her hometown. And when she looked at the city, she was actually still attached to it. She wanted it to be preserved to an extent. She missed the city, basically. She wanted to have a sense of connection to it. She was still attached to the city. And again, we saw what kind of city it was. It was not a good place for anyone to live in. So, what was she missing? What did she look back at? I mean, here it's simply that she looked at Sodom. She looked back at Sodom. But what was in Sodom? Sodom was a place of rampant sin, sexual sin. It was a place where two people can come out of nowhere, and that very night, men from all parts of the city would demand that those men be given to be raped. What kind of city do you think that would be? And this woman, she looked back at that kind of city. I don't know what's the right word for it. I keep using the word missed, but more like she was still attached to it. She wanted to know what happened to that city. She was still attached to a city like that. She was still connected to an extent. And that was the punishment that she received as a part of it. And it gets worse because if we look at what happened to Lot's daughters, the two daughters that this man offered to the men of Sodom, verse 32, same chapter 19, verse 32 and 33.
Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. So they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose.
That'll do. I mean, the next day, the younger daughter also does this. So what is happening here is incest. Their Lot has no idea what is happening. He's drunk. He's probably under a great amount of stress or something. So these women, they get him drunk, and then they have sexual relations with their own father. And to us, that seems like a very disgusting and despicable thing to do. But to these two girls, to these two women, it didn't seem like such a bad thing. For them, it was almost logical choice. They were like, our father is an old man, we can't find men to marry, so why not just sleep with our father? This was their moral standard from living in that city. Lot himself was a righteous man. He didn't do any of these things. If you look at the book of Hebrews that comes in the New Testament, Lot is one of the was considered still righteous because he himself did not engage in this sin. But what about his wife? What about his own daughters? All of that was gone. These women thought it was logical for them to sleep with their father. That was the state in which and do you really think that Lot would have taught his daughters that this was fine, that this was acceptable? I don't think you would have thought that. But he lived in a city which thought that homosexuality was fine, incest also should have been fine. So these girls, even though their father himself was a righteous man, because they grew up in a city, because they grew up in an environment that didn't consider these things to be evil, it was normal for them. It became normalized. I study in MCC, and the people the kids that come there, the kids younger than me, or people my age, sometimes they come from very good Christian families, but here all of that is just gone. There is no sense of the fear of God or the fear of right and wrong. They have no conscience. Their conscience have been brutalized and murdered, and the conscience are basically decaying right now. And they do all of these things, and I wonder what happened. It's not like they're being taught to do these things at home. Their parents are very sincere people. So why does this happen? And it's very simple because of the culture to which they're exposed to. It's very important that you yourself find yourself among other Christians, among not just Christians, but with other people that are sincere in their faith. And it's even more important for your children because at the end, even though you yourself might be saved, you yourself might escape hell because of the kindness of God, there is no guarantee for your children. That's what we see here. It's like I keep using the example of a seed, any seed. You take a mango seed or an apple seed, whatever you want. Now, I can take the best seed from the best species available. So, suppose it's a GMO crop, it's a genetically modified organism, it's the best seed available. Like it's the most fertile seed available. And I take the best water available, highly mineralized water with the best supplements available, and then I get the best fertilizer available. It has high nitrogen content, it has phosphorus, it has all the nutrients needed for plant growth. And then I put the seed onto the road. I put the seed onto a tile floor and I pour the best water on it and I put the best fertilizer. Do you think that seed would grow? No, it won't grow. Even if it has the best water, even if it has the best fertilizer, it won't grow because its location is not right. The place where it is not right. No matter how sincere you might feel, no matter how much good messages you listen to, or how much you would read the word of God, or how much theology you learn, how much of the word of God you learn, unless you find yourself in a place where you can grow, it'll all be for nothing. You yourself will go down, and anything that you want to build, any legacy that you want to build, it'll be lost. Your life will become almost as pathetic as Lot. Maybe you won't find yourself engaging in incest, but whatever hopes you had for your children will be gone. Any hope you have for your family will be gone. You'll end up like Lot. This is what the natural consequence of choosing what is more prosperous, what is more wealthy. Because even if the people there are evil, you go there simply for the sake of self prosperity. You go there for comfort. You go there for security. So that's what happened to Lot. The land that he went to, the land of Sodom and Gomorrah. Today, that same land is land that is used for oil drilling. So the thing about land that has oil is that you can't grow anything on that land. It's fundamentally infertile. Nothing you put there will grow because the soil is just full of oil, it's full of petroleum. So it's not a place where crops can grow. It's very toxic to all living things. So Lot chose to go to a place which was supposedly green, supposedly fruitful, and today that land, or even during his own time, it was destroyed. There's nothing left in that land. And we saw the consequences of Lot's choice. Now we look at this consequence of Abraham's choice. So Abraham chose to go to a place where it was less prosperous. He went to another man's property, essentially the oaks of Mamre. Mamre is the other man. He went there, he set up his tent there. And obviously the land of Canaan was not as prosperous as the land of Sodom. That's why Lot chose the land of Sodom. And one thing that I would like to point out is when the Israelites came back 400 years after Abraham, when the Israelites came back to the land of Canaan, after they were released from Egypt and they came to the land of Canaan, how was the land of Canaan described? Like, what was the description given for the land of Canaan? It's called the land flowing with milk and honey, land that flows with milk and honey. So, the land that Abraham went to, God made that land prosperous. The land that Lot chose, God made that land infertile. There was nothing able to grow there. It became a barren wasteland. That's what it is today. And another thing that I like to point out is before Abraham made this choice, before Abraham chose to choose the less prosperous land, God had only spoken to him once. If you look at Genesis chapter 12, all God had said to him up to this point was, Abraham, leave your father's city, go out where I tell you to go, and I will bless you. That's all God tells Abraham. He doesn't tell Abraham, Abraham, you must choose what is righteous. Abraham, you must choose the land of Canaan. That is the land I will give to you. There is no talk of that at all. Basically, if you look at Genesis chapter 12, God speaks to him for about 3 verses, and that's it. Nothing about the land of Canaan, nothing about choosing what is good over what seems wealthy, nothing about that. And then after Abraham chooses to go to Canaan, after Abraham chooses the less prosperous land, immediately for example, Genesis chapter 13, verse 12, Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Immediately in verse 14, if someone can read verse 14, 15, 16, 17, up to 17, verses 14 to 17. Chapter 13, verses 14 to 17.
And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot has separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever, and I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants will also be numbered. Arise and walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you.
So, Lot, he chose to go to Sodom. Did Lot have anything left in the land of Sodom after it was destroyed? What holdings did he have? What was his property in the land of Sodom? He had nothing. He lost everything. Not just the land, he lost his family as well. He lost his legacy. He lost his future. All the things that he built up until that moment, all of it was gone because he chose the land that supposedly was supposed to make him richer, make him more prosperous. But here God tells Abraham, and this happens immediately after Abraham chooses the land of Canaan, or goes to the land of Canaan. He says, arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. He says that Abraham, because you chose what was good over what was beneficial to you, over what was prosperous to you, I will give you all that you see. You go and you walk through the length and breadth of the land. Wherever you walk, it is yours now. And he says that I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, the offspring can also be counted. Now we know that the people of Israel can, the Jews of today can count the lineage back all the way to Abraham, but Abraham had another son, and that was Ishmael. Now Ishmael had 12 sons, and those 12 sons were the fathers of the 12 Arab families way back. I'm talking 2500 years ago, possibly even before that. And these Arab families are the ones that became the Arabs of today. So if you look at it, everything from Turkey, if you look at the world map, everything from Turkey all the way up until North India, all the people there are descended from Abraham. All the Muslims to this day, they consider themselves to be the children of Abraham through Ishmael, not through Isaac. And the Jews who are present all over the world today. You'll find Jews in every country today. Even if you look at the West, if you look at Germany, if you look at the US, they're everywhere. All of them also trace their ancestry to Abraham. Is there anyone here today? Is there any group here today that can trace their ancestry to Lot? There's no one here. So this is what you actually get when you choose what is right. Now God didn't tell Abraham to choose the land of Canaan. God didn't tell Abraham to choose the lesser land. He was quiet during this whole time. He didn't give him any advice. He didn't tell him what to do. He was quiet. He was waiting for Abraham to make the choice. Immediately after Abraham makes the choice, God tells him, I will bless you now. I give you this land and I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. So, how would that translate to our lives now? How do we apply this principle to our lives now? How do we make the same choice as Abraham? Now, in this same way, how I look at it today, because especially as Christians living in India, which is not a majority Christian country, or even in so-called majority Christian countries, even in the US, the people in the US are not necessarily very supportive of Christianity. I mean, they're not Hindus, but they're atheists. That's even worse, I would say. So, as part of that, how does that apply to us living today? I would look at it in the way in which we choose our jobs, or the way we choose our homes, or how we send our children to school, to what kind of school, or if we send them to school at all. Now, it's true that, if you go to some place like, say, LA in the US, California will probably make you much richer. It'll make you much more wealthier if you go to California than, say, if you were to go to Arkansas or Mississippi. These places are, they're not bad places. They're very beautiful places. They have prairies and they have all the natural beauty of the world, but they're not good for profitability. Or in India, there's a choice between going to Bangalore, or you can go to Thuthukudi or someplace. You can go to some backwater place where it is good land. It is not bad land. It is still land that God made, and in many ways, it is probably more healthy for your body than any place like Bangalore or something. But Bangalore will make you richer. Bangalore will make you, it gives you more economic opportunities. But we know the culture of places like Bangalore, or the culture of places like Delhi or Mumbai or Chennai for that matter. These are places where God is not honored. No God is honored for that matter. These are places where the self is honored. The appetite is the God. People here, they don't worship any God necessarily. They just worship themselves. All the things that benefit them are the things that they pursue. So it comes down to whether we want to live among people like this, or whether we want to live among, at least if not other Christians, at least among people who care for the more simple things of life, for the more real things of life, for the people who are not obsessed with making money, or obsessed with climbing up the social ladder, or getting more status. Because again, Abraham didn't go and live among other followers of God. He lived among the other people there, just normal people, people from, we later find that there were three people there. They were Mamre, they were Eshcol, and they were Anar. These people, they weren't very rich people, but they were good people. And even though they weren't necessarily followers of the same God, they were people who acknowledged God. They were people who were honorable. And Abraham chose to live among them. He made friends with them. And when you're free, look at the chapter 14. These men went with Abraham to rescue Lot when there was a war there, and Abraham had to go rescue Lot, and these men went with him. They had no reason to go with him. They went with him because they considered Abraham to be one of their own. So he lived with honorable and good people. So in that sense, we can look at where we live, or let's say our jobs. It's a very good example. You can work for a company, or you can work among people who are good. The things that are valued there are not things that are valued in other places. For example, the entertainment industry. If you look at the lives of actors and actresses, they don't live very virtuous lives. Again, I'm not making any judgments on a specific actor or an actress, but as a whole, their lives are not conducive to virtue. The people who live there, they don't live for honorable things. They don't live for greater things than themselves. It's all about vanity. It's all about what is here today. It's all about the appetite, all about food or sex or money or attention. It's about this. So if you choose to work in such an environment, of course you're going to have a harder time worshiping God. You're going to have a harder time sacrificing things to God. Like we saw here, Abraham was able to build the altar where he can sacrifice to God only when he lived apart from these people. Lot could not do the same. Lot lived among the people of Sodom, so he could not find a place to sacrifice to God. And that is what led to his decay. So it comes down to what kind of industry or what kind of workplace we choose to engage ourselves in. Because we have to see where we spend our time at. And there's no point, like I said, you can put the seed in the soil, any soil, and it might grow. Or you can put the best kind of seed onto a tile floor or onto tarmac and it won't grow. You can put it on the road and it still won't grow because its place is not correct. And again, when it comes to the third thing, children, when it comes to children, and this is what I've seen, whether it be in college or even in school, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, this is very almost hypocritical of me since I grew up in the school system. I studied from LKG 12th standard and I'm now studied 3 years in college and I'm studying my fourth year in college. But overall, the idea of sending your children to someone else, paying someone else to take care of your children, to pay them to teach your children for, what is it, like 13 years, 14 years up until they finish school, and then it repeats again for college or whatever. And let's think about it. Most schools start at 8 o'clock or 8:30. I know you have to wake up at 7 or 6, depending on whether you're close to the school or not. So the child wakes up at 6, goes to the school, sits for 8 hours or sometimes 9 hours, comes back home at around 3:34. And these days it keeps getting worse. It's like 4:30 or more. So that's about 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours. See, we have 24 hours in a day. Let's assume the child sleeps for 8 hours. There's 16 hours in the day. Overall, about 10 hours, including travel and all that. 10 hours goes away in school. That leaves about 6 more hours left. And then the child comes back home and then has to do homework or something for another 2 hours. And in India, we're not satisfied with just school. We have to send them to coaching centers. We have to send them to tuition, where another 2 hours goes. What? I mean, like, what is the point of having children if you're just going to send them away for most of the day for most of their lives? At that point, don't have children. Just have a pet or something. You'll spend more time with your dog in the house than you would with your children. And people say you need an education. I'm not against education. But we are living in a time where people can learn anything they want at home. And personally, the idea of sending children to school, especially in India, we don't send children to public school. We have to send them to a proper private school, and the fees they keep going higher. And what do they learn there that they can't learn at home? And another excuse that people say is interaction. You need interaction. Children, they won't socialize properly if you don't send them to school, which never made sense to me. Like, what kind of socialization do you get at school? I spent 14 years in the school system, and the one consistent thing I've heard from every teacher is don't talk. Like, all the way from LKG to 12th standard, stop talking, pin drop silence, and all the different ways they say it. Don't talk. How are you supposed to socialize with people if you don't talk? If you can't interact with the fellow next to you, what kind of socialization does that afford? And even then, like, see, children are supposed to socialize with everyone, not just with children their own age. The idea of socialization is not like they put you in a room where you have to sit in the same place with maybe a half an hour lunch period, maybe 20-minute break. But you sit in the same place and you listen to this like five different, very angry, very disturbed and anxious middle-aged women scream at you for talking to people, and they're explaining all kinds of things. I agree with that. They do that, but they're supposed to stay in the same place. You're not supposed to talk. You're supposed to listen to what they say, and then the only way you can talk is you're talking to another equally confused fellow like you. A child's interaction is supposed to be with everyone, not just kids their own age. You're supposed to talk to people who are older than you, much older than you, with their grandparents, with their parents, with kids who are older than them, kids who are younger than them. They're supposed to have a complete interaction with the whole of the human society, not just their own age. Because what happens when they interact with their own ages, they're not able to see things from others' point of view. They get into their teenage years and they're like, all the parents, they're all the same. They're all the same because you're all the same. The parents are not the same. You don't talk to your parents. You don't talk to each other's parents. You only talk to yourselves about your parents. And they talk about the generation gap. The generation gap is an artificial concept. It's a direct consequence of putting people with each other. It's not a natural thing. No one complained about the generation gap in like 1000 BC. No one talked about the generation gap because you're able to talk to people of all ages. So school and all these things are just the logical problems with school. These days, it only gets worse. And in the West, they're straight up teaching children about different gender expression and all that. So right now, putting a child in school is not just stupid; it's also harmful. Before, it was just illogical. It didn't make sense for you to do it. Now it's like actively harmful. It's the equivalent of what Lot was doing. Here, take my two daughters and do whatever you want with them. When we send your, when a person sends their children to school, they're saying, here are my children, do whatever you want with them, teach them whatever you want. I will only look at what they're doing when the report card comes. I will take very little interest in what they do. I will get angry at them if they don't get the marks that I expect them to get. But as far as everything goes, here are my children. You do whatever you want with them for 8 hours in a day. This is completely anti-ethical to what Abraham did. Abraham, despite having no children, decided to go away from all of these people. He focused on what was actually important. He focused on building a real legacy, on something that will matter long after he died. For example, the country of Israel, which exists even today, Abraham didn't see any of it as being possible. He never owned a piece of land throughout the land of Canaan, even up until his death. The only thing he was able to own, the only thing that people could say that belongs to Abraham, was a cave that he bought to bury his wife and later on himself. That was the only property he had in the land of Canaan. And God said, Abraham, you walk through the entire land and give it to you. And Abraham, he kept walking over the same land for almost 100 years. God didn't give it to him. So, Abraham would have obviously thought, Lord, you told me to walk. I haven't gotten anything. But he had faith. He had faith. He knew that one day God will give me this land. Just like one day God said, I'll give you a son. He gave me a son. One day I will get this land. And to this very day, 4,000 years, 3,500 years have passed. And to this very day, the children of Abraham, they're still fighting for it, but the land still belongs to them. And the only people they're fighting with are the Palestinians. They're fighting with Muslims who are also the children of Abraham. So all of that land, not just the land of Israel, all the Middle East belongs to the children of Abraham. So that's what matters in our lives now. We can go like the rest of the world. We can pursue what is safe, what is comfortable, what is prosperous, what is socially acceptable. People talk a lot about how gender and all of these things are social constructs. School is a social construct. It's not a real thing. Society itself is a social construct. All of our laws are social construct. The idea of good and bad, morality, justice, these things are all social constructs. Just because they're constructed by society doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're not real. We construct them because we can live better. And in the same way, sometimes certain social constructs, they're just social constructs, they're not real things. So we can, subscribe to them. We can say that that's what everyone else is doing. Homeschooling is not what everyone does. If you homeschool your children, they will not have as many opportunities as, say, someone who goes to a private school. It's true, they won't have many opportunities. For example, I'm pretty sure that none of the people who homeschool their children are deprived of opportunities to learn about the pronouns of non-binary people. I think that's a great thing that they are deprived of. One of the things they're deprived of is listening to all the different spectrum of the LGBTQ spectrum. They're deprived of that. I think in a broad way, I think I'm fine if my children are deprived of that knowledge. I think I'll be fine. I think they'll also be fine. So it comes down to what kind of choice we make. What are our priorities? What do we say is more important? And more importantly, are we willing to act on that choice? I can talk to you now. You might listen to me. But both of us, if we then, after, this 1 hour, after today, if we just go back to doing whatever else we were doing, we keep living like the rest of the world with the right knowledge, with this right faith, with all of our biblical knowledge. If we have all of this inside our heads, but we never actually start making consequence, we never actually start building altars and sacrificing our wealth, sacrificing our future, sacrificing our desires, sacrificing our comfort for the sake of a good future for our children, for a meaningful, godly future for our children, then everything that I'm saying is useless. I am basically like a broken radio that keeps repeating the same news over and over again. There's nothing real about what I say. And if people who listen to me just go back to their old lives, then they're wasting their time. I'm wasting my time, they're wasting their time. It's not enough that we know. What matters ultimately is that we act on what we know.